What is up, my Shadowverse soldiers, and welcome back to another Shadowverse Evolve video. Alright soldiers, so we're going to be moving on into the next set of crafts here, and we're going to move on into Departed Abyss. Alright, so I'm going to be honest about this deck. I didn't really know that much about it prior to. I did record a podcast episode, which will be out, later this week if you soldiers want to check that out. And we did talk about Departed Abyss craft because this deck actually did top at the most recent regional. So with that information, we already know that Departed Abysscraft is going to be the deck on the map for sets 12 and 13, but we only have like a week left of sets 12 and 13, so go ahead and get prepared for UMA in this very next week. But if you have a regional coming up, this is a deck you can be taking. Alright soldiers, so let's not waste any time getting into these new cards. So we have some new Necrocharge support, which is very helpful. Alright, so getting into our first card here, so we have Grimoire Death Teller. So she's a 2-cost 2/3 that came out of set 12. She has Ward, but when she comes into play, you bury the top 2 cards of your deck, and she has an activate ability to summon this card from your cemetery and give it last words, banish this card. You can activate if there are only at least 10 cards in your cemetery and there are no cards named Grimoire Death Teller on your field. Alright, so I would kind of say that this card kind of moves into the spot that where Do Blame is, because Do Blame is our 2-cost card that allows us to bury the top card of our deck, while being able to bury the top 2 on turn 2, while on turn 1 maybe being able to do a Poltergeist, or being able to mill the top 2 cards of our deck ourselves on turn 1, and then having this 2-cost ward, which allows us to play a little defensively, because we need to get that Necrocharge 10 as fast as possible. Alright, so this next card that not many of you soldiers are really going to agree with me here, but I do believe it's just some extra Necrocharge support, and if you are playing a bit casually, this might be something you might be moving on towards, because I do like the 2-for-1 special when it comes to these cards. Alright, so we have Link Stack from Necromancer, so she's 3-cost 3/3. When she comes into play, you bury the top card of your deck, nothing too crazy there. But on this Evolve effect, turning her into a 4/4, and on Evolve, selecting a Departed follower that costs 3 less in your cemetery and summoning it is some value. And alright soldiers, taking a gander at all the Departed cards that are 3 or less, these are all the options that you can choose from outside of spell cards, of course, that you're able to use off of Link Staff and Necromancer. And just to get you soldiers kind of like thinking on where I'm going when using Link Staff Necromancer, we have cards like Mechasaw Deathbringer, which helps us more on the Necrocharge. And then on top of that, we can just hard remove a follower off the field by using its last words. And I know a lot of you soldiers aren't going this route at all, but this is also some things to think about. So you have Arcus, which is also a Departed follower you can get off of the cemetery off of this effect. And since this follower doesn't evolve, this will be pretty good value for some control through drawing cards or summoning ghost tokens, or even doing more Necrocharge. And of course, those were only just 2 options of the things that we can choose from when Link Staff Necromancer. And of course, there are better options, but of course, if you are balling on a budget and you really want to just rock with what you have and the things that came out in set 12 and 13, with some extra things if you really want to cook up, those are some options you can definitely think about, soldiers. Alright, but let's talk about these new cards that came out in set 13 that really does bring this deck on the map. Okay, and we have Chris beyond the patch. So he's a 4-cost 4/4. When he comes into play, Fanfare, you select an Abysscraft follower not named Chris beyond the patch that costs 5 or less in your cemetery, and then Necrocharge 10. You can summon it and give it ward. Alright, so there are a lot of options because it says Abysscraft followers 5 or less. So as long as it's not Chris beyond the patch, you can get any follower from the cemetery, and as long as you have Necrocharge 10, you can summon it, give it ward. So this card kind of replaces Death's Breath. And my oh my, let me tell you the options of Abysscraft followers we can get that are 5 or less. We have Tawi, we have Ice, just came out, and Ice is being able to play from Cemetery. And then when you play Ice from Cemetery, you can evolve, get that Magic Train, and you already have like 3 cards on board just from playing Chris beyond the patch. But of course, moving on into our next card, so we have Kagero Swordbound Soul, so he's a 2-cost 2/2. If you have Necrocharge 10, this follower has Rush and Bane. But he does have a Fanfare ability to choose one of the 2 effects. You can either 1, select a Soul Strike in your cemetery and put it into its EX area, and then Necrocharge 20, it costs 2 less to play this turn, or you can 2 bury the top 2 cards of your deck. And of course, when playing this on tempo on turn 2, going ahead and burying the top 2 cards of your deck is just pretty good, because if you don't see Grimoire turn 2, this is just a honestly good turn 2 as well. But getting into this Soul Strike, so it's a 2-cost spell card, so you can select enemy following field and deal it 4 damage, and if you have Necrocharge 20, you can deal 4 damage to its leader. Alright, so of course, if we're going to be doing big things in the late game, having the Necrocharge 20 and then swinging in for like storm damage or doing burn damage, by the time we get Necrocharge 20, we're trying our best to close out the game. So going ahead and pinging the enemy leader for 4 damage while playing Kagero Swordbound Soul for like 2 play points is pretty good in the late game. Alright, and speaking of the late game, there are 2 options that we're able to choose from when going for late game and closing out the game with this deck. And of course, we have our own Departed late game follower himself, Demon Lord Eachtar. So this card has been around since set 4. Very good card for Departed followers because you're able to choose 2 Abysscraft followers that cost 2 or less, and then they're played. If you have Necrocharge 20, they have like a whole bunch of attack and defense. So they're really big, and then they have the rush on top of it. And if you play certain followers that are able to get that buff stat line, we're able to have those followers swing for damage that very same turn. All right, and then we have Odelle Black Swan. So she's a 5-cost 6/4, which came out quite some time ago. When she comes to play, deal 2 damage to each enemy leader and enemy follower on the field. But if you have Necrocharge 20, she has Storm. And whenever she swings, so she has a strike ability to deal 2 extra damage to each enemy leader and enemy follower on the field. So in all reality, when you do get to Necrocharge 20, this follower is going to have Storm, so you're going to be able to do both. So you're going to be doing a total of 10 damage to enemy leader if you're able to swing and face that very same turn. All right, but without further ado, let's go ahead and look into some deck lists, starting with the Odelle Black Swan build. All right, soldiers, so here is my version of the deck. I think this one runs pretty well. Of course, there are some options that you can disagree with. Some ratios you can definitely change around, but I think these are the things that I really like about the deck. All right, so starting off with my personal favorite blend of the deck, I really do love Milteo the Lovers. This deck kind of really does help you build a board, and then the Evolve helps you close out games as well. So on turn 5, I just don't know what is a better play, honestly, because I know IC is a nice turn to go ahead and get the Magic Train, but on turn 5, you can't do all that. So being able to go ahead and play this on turn 5, being able to discard a card, build up a board, especially if you're going first, that's going to be some value, because no matter what, you get 2 followers that are 3 or less off the top. Their fanfares go off if you need them to, and they can start running. And then also with the applications of the Evolve to being able to destroy each enemy follower while sending the enemy leader to 6 is very good for closing out games. And of course, in the Odelle Black Swan build, if you manage to clear the board and your opponent doesn't heal, Odelle Black Swan will be the great righteous thing that you need that very next turn to close out the game. And of course, we have lots of Necrocharge tools, I will say, that really help us get to 20 very quickly, like the Poltergeist, Soul Conversion to help us dig through our deck very quickly. We have Ilganel, every time she dies, she's going to be a milling one. And then Gremory Death Teller, which is going to mill 2 when she's able to be played. And then if we have the Necrocharge 10, which we can definitely get to very fast, we can just keep looping the Gremory, and then after she dies, of course, she's banished. But she already replaces herself, so that's the pretty cool thing about it. And of course, in terms of removal, we have the Icy Magic Train, which is always going to be an option, seems going forward, because spawning that Magic Train out that kind of just protects itself at the end of turn is just pretty goated. All right, but speaking of removal, let's talk about the Wretched Triss controversy here. All right, so before we get any deeper into the deck, I do want to clear up some misinformation that we just had from our webcam locals that I wanted you soldiers to know about. All right, so the card Wretched Triss. So for 4, we can select 2 Wasteland followers that cost Aurelia Thunder Cemetery and the Necrocharge 10 summon them. Of course, we only have like maybe a couple of Necrocharge followers that cost 3 or less, that being Great Pit Corpse, the Wretch, and then Ilganel. So usually the combo is mostly going to be you do Great Pit Corpse, and then you play Ilganel, so you're able to go ahead and do both these followers' fanfares. But here's the thing. For Great Pit Corpse, you can play Great Pit Corpse and then not do Ilganel's fanfare for the Necrocharge 10, so you don't banish her. So you're able to put that last words to put her into the EX area while burying the top card of your deck. And if that sounded confusing, let me go ahead and explain it in some simpler terms. Alright, so basically we let Wretched Triss go off first, which allows us to summon 2 Wasteland followers. Of course, when we play both of these followers, we get to choose which fanfares get to go off first because it's our turn. So we can go ahead and choose Great Pit Corpse to go ahead and bury another follower. We can bury Ilganel. Ilganel's fanfare won't be able to go off because she technically didn't hit the field, and we don't get to choose her fanfare because she is dying. So choosing Ilganel will put her into the EX area while burying the top card, which will really help us out for some Necrocharge. And I'm hoping I explained that the best I can. I think I just did the explanation twice, but to be honest with you, that's how the interaction is going to work if you're going to choose both those Wasteland followers to play. And then lastly, I do want to talk about the tech card that we can kind of move around in this deck, and that's the 2-cost option, and that's going to be the Liberté. So of course, if you play Liberté on turn 2 along with the Ilganel, if you keep looping Ilganel, of course, turn 1, being able to go ahead and bury another follower, making this evolve cost 1, which will be very helpful to do some damage in the early game. But yeah, I don't want to stay on the Odelle Black Swan build too much because we still have to talk about Eachtar, but this is the example build. Of course, soldiers, I will be including the deck description in below, so check that out if you soldiers want to. Alrighty, and soldiers, we already had a topping deck list for Eachtar actually in our Houston regional, and I tried my best to kind of differ it as much as I could. And I'm going to be honest with you, when you make this deck pretty as tribal as you can, I really like it. I just absolutely love like the tribal archetype, anything that's like departed. If I can throw anything that's departed in here, to make the Tartarus, the Tormentor, like more active by being able to get any departed card off of the top 2, which really will help out in the late game when we do play this card later on. Alright, so of course, another splashable thing that we're able to put into this deck, which is a departed card, is Undying Resentment. I really do like what this card does, being able to deal 3 damage while bearing the top card of your deck. Of course, Whispers of the Dream kind of does the same thing, but it just only chooses a 3 or less follower on the field and destroying it while doing the same thing. So of course, I put both options in there, but you can move those ratios around. But I included the Undying Resentment because this is a departed card that we're able to get off of Tartarus, the Tormentor's effect. But if I were to kind of move around this card, I would definitely put Fall from Grace. Like, that is just a good neutral card that's able to get rid of any card, banishing it. Of course, your opponent is going to heal 2 while drawing a card, which will feel bad, but having that hard removal and quick timing is very important. But of course, I don't want to negate anything that Whispers of a Dream does represent. This is still a good card. Of course, Earthright is still a very dangerous deck. Do not sleep on it. Riley is a card that will definitely mess up your day, because being able to heal for 6 in that deck is absolutely insane. And of course, moving on into our late game, so Eachtar, of course, if we're going to be choosing 2 or less Abysscraft followers, we want to go ahead and choose followers that are able to attack or have some good value when they are played. Alright, so getting into one of the GOAT 2-cost MVP follower cards that we are going to be playing, a Skeleton Dreamer. So being able to turn this into a 5 attacking storm damage follower is pretty good. Now mind you, if you are playing against the mirror match, do be mindful that Whispers of a Dream is still a thing that can still happen to you, because this is still a 2 or less follower. And then of course, looking at Kagura Swordbound Soul, so just like on the Necrocharge 20 play, we're able to go for the Soul Strike, and then the Soul Strike is going to be free in the EX area to be able to deal 4 damage to a leader, and then we're going to swing in for 5 damage that same turn too, so we're going to do a total of 9 damage in 1 turn. And of course, that's not counting for any of the other amulets you might have been playing throughout the game, from like other Skeleton Dreamers to buff up any Wasteland followers that you have, or any other ways that you are going to be spawning out mounts to go ahead and buff up followers. So the issue that I have a problem with this deck is, the thing about Eachtar is you're able to get cards out of your cemetery, and of course, he's going to check the Necrocharge 20, but the cards that we do play are also going to check for Necrocharge 20, so you might be in a kind of weird spot where you're like, alright, well I have Necrocharge 20 when I have Demon Lord Eachtar, but when I play the Kagura Swordbound Soul, mind you, you are getting a whole bunch of cards out of your cemetery, so make sure you have that Necrocharge, 23 or 24, so you have access to all the abilities when you do go for those fanfare cards. And of course, soldiers, I will be including the deck code in the description below, and in this deck list, I actually do only have 9 Evo spots, so you can really play around with that extra one. I wanted to give you soldiers the space when building this Eachtar list, because maybe you can play Eachtar and then play a 2-cost that's able to evolve and have more stats and stuff like that. But I wanted you soldiers to kind of play around with the deck, at least this one, if you wanted to build Eachtar. And alrighty, soldiers, that is it for the deck profile. Thank you so much for watching. Now, some last minute updates before we get into the rest of everything we're going to be doing. So how I wanted to format everything for the rest of this channel, at least for the rest of the month, was to kind of talk about these decks, craft wise throughout the week. But I don't think that's going to work out, because next week is our last week before Uma comes out. And I really do want to talk about those reveal cards, because I am very excited for Uma to really drop this next set. And alrighty, soldiers, that is pretty much it. Check out the channel for more updates and stuff like that. And of course, I will see you in the next video. So make sure you are safe in whatever you do tonight, and safe whatever you do for the rest of the year. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Yeah. TRINN. Just to get you away. What I got to do. What I got to do. Just to get you away. What I got to do. What I got to do. Just to get you away. You pull me too close, now we hesitate. Every single move you make, it makes me feel